Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft, and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. Welcome to Table Talk. It is so good to have you tonight. I have a very special guest tonight, someone I have wanted to talk to for some time. Her name is Roz Morris, and I first became acquainted with her on Twitter many years ago when I was participating in NaNoWriMo, and I started to read her books and then listen to everything she was talking about with regard to storytelling and how to write your novel. She's got a book on diagnosing why you're not getting it finished, which I was reading this morning, and I was like, man, this is material I really needed to reacquaint myself with right now. So I am very pleased to have her on. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things. Welcome, Roz.
Hello, Heath. Thank you so much for having me and for that fantastic introduction. And I think it's absolutely magic that you found me on Twitter years ago.
Yes.
And I was just typing the little things I was interested in into the universe, had no idea who was meeting them. And years later, you thought, oh, there was that book or that person I followed, and I'll contact her. And here we are talking. We're real people, but we all sort of kind of exist in our own little pixels, and it's wonderful. Anyway, I am overcome with awesomeness.
Yes, and I think it was like I probably found you through the NaNoWriMo hashtag that year. It was many years ago, but I'm sure you were tweeting under that, and I was like looking for people and following people who were tweeting NaNoWriMo and things like that. Well, Roz, do you want to let everyone know who you are and what you do in your own words?
In my own words, I'm British,
So
as you
bring-
can probably tell from the accent.
Coming to us from London, yes.
Yes. Basically, I love stories. I've loved stories all my life, and the written word. When I was a kid, I would just get lost in a book and I would read the same page over and over again because I just loved the way that words could create something so absorbing that would just kind of suck your whole mind and soul in. And I was always very aware of how stories worked and very curious about how they worked. And I ended up working in a publishing company, and I really wanted to write my own books too, but didn't quite know how. But gradually I met other people who were doing that. And Rita, I married one of them. And by doing that, though, I came to know quite a lot of other people who were writers and who were working in the writing world. And I started writing a novel of my own and also ghostwriting books for other people because publishers needed, at the time, they and they still do actually, they needed people who could reliably write books to a deadline and to particular sets of parameters. So they'd need a particular kind of genre written quite quickly. And I found I could do that. So I had this wonderful apprenticeship where I was working with editors and I was writing books for people who were quite famous names, but I'm not allowed to say who they are. And meanwhile, learning my own craft and working out what I wanted to write. And I also worked with a literary consultancy. I found I was quite good at tutoring writers who were working on their own manuscripts, but didn't quite know what wasn't quite working about them. And they also didn't have the tools to revise them for themselves. So I found I was teaching people this. And I then wrote the book you mentioned, Nail Your Novel, and it's called Why Writers Abandon Books and How You Can Draft, Fix, and Finish with Confidence.
Right here.
And there it is, yes. And I put all the things that I found people were having difficulty with into this book because I realized I'd solved these problems. Because of the work I was doing ghostwriting, I was having to figure out how to say restructure a book, how to look at the structure of a book and check if it's working, how to make sure the characters all balanced nicely and that they were the right sorts of characters and that they drew the reader in the right way and that the reader felt the way they were supposed to about them. And I put all those learnings into that book. And after that, I wrote a couple more Nail Your Novel books. I wrote one about how to write characters,
right?
And how to write plot. And I also made a workbook version of the original Nail Your Novel. And in the meantime, while doing that, I was also working on my own novels because the whole purpose that I set out with was to write my own books, as we all do. You know, we've got this little dream of the books we're going to write. And I brought out my first one, which was called My Memories of a Future Life. And then there was one called Lifeform 3, which is quite science fictional. And there they are. And that one actually got longlisted for the World Fantasy Award, to my massive surprise. Because every book just starts off with you in your office just doing the thing that you feel you have to do. And the third novel, which is the one that is called Everest, which is that came from my fascination with people climbing Mount Everest. And I also wrote a travel memoir, which is something I didn't expect to write, but I just found I had all these notes I'd taken, and they were basically every time we went on holiday, I'd take a particular diary with me and I'd write in it. And one day my husband said, well, these are quite good stories, you should use them. And I said, yeah, I'm collecting them they'll go in a novel one day. And he said, no, write them as just a light-hearted memoir. And I said, but nobody wants to read a memoir from me, and I don't write that sort of thing. But I gradually began to like the idea, and I mentioned it to a few people who I knew would tell me the truth, and they all said, oh, we'd love to read that. So I found myself doing a new sort of writing, and that's, I think, quite important if you're a creative person. Sorry, I've gone on rather a lot about what I do.
No, this is fine. That's fine.
This was something I didn't expect I could do, but then I got grabbed by the idea, and then I had a go, and people said, actually, we'd quite like you to do that. And so I did it, and now it's a new kind of writing that I could do. And I honestly didn't think that I could. And so we kind of evolve as creatives and artists, and we might go in unexpected directions, but we might find something that, if it seems to tickle you a bit, you should try it, because it might be just the next thing that you need to do.
All right. Well, I've got a lot to talk about right here, but actually, let's start with the ghostwriting idea, because I'm interested in this, because we also talk about the business side of things and how things actually work. So, I guess I assumed that you were contacted by individual authors, but you had mentioned before publishers.
This is a big misconception. Publishing is a business, and ghostwriting is a business. It's not usually authors who instigate a ghostwriting situation. It's usually a publisher or an agent, because you have to pay the ghostwriter to do the work, because they're not going to get anything out of it otherwise, and they're not going to do it on spec. So it's actually a commercial decision. A publisher will think, it would be really good if we could publish a book by such and such, usually a celebrity, but we know they can't write it in the way we would need it written. So we'll get a ghostwriter who will do all that, and will write it as though they are the person. I mean, there are very famous examples now, like Prince Harry and Spare, and Donald Trump's memoir writer. And there are absolutely loads of books that are ghostwritten, because a publisher has decided there is a market for them. So it's worth them paying quite a bit to the person whose name is going to go on the cover and who's going to front the book. And it's also worth paying a writer who will actually get the writing done and deliver the manuscript that the publishers would like to sell. So
with the memoir side of things, or a nonfiction book by, I guess I kind of get that. You're talking the royals, Donald Trump, celebrities, all that kind of stuff. But were these books? But I guess were these books that, like, fiction brands? I mean,
I was doing both. I was doing both.
You were doing both.
Yes,
okay.
Some fiction is ghostwritten.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering. So, okay, so it seemed when I think of ghostwriting, I most associate that with nonfiction books by celebrities. But so there is some fiction that's ghostwritten because the publisher thinks that this author is now a brand, and they need this book out next year, but they can't get it out by next year, so they're going to ghostwrite a fiction book to, like, put a slot for that brand.
Several reasons. That reason, yes. The named author can't produce as many as the publisher would like, so they might get a ghostwriter to help them along, or to even do the writing altogether. I mean, James Patterson actually makes no secret of it. He's got a kind of factory of authors that he works with to keep the output up. Then you get people who have died, like Robert Ludlum, and the publisher knows the brand is very successful. People like the ingredients of a Robert Ludlum thriller, so they just get people who are going to carry on writing more Robert Ludlum books. And then you also get people who have had really interesting lives, and whose life seems to be the stuff of novels, really. So they know there would be a market for novels written by those people. Maybe they're adventurers or explorers, or they've been in the Secret Service or something, and they know there'll be a market. And so they will find a writer who can take the authentic aspects of that person's life and write the book they would write if they could.
Do you sit down and interview that person then? You're like, first of all, my research is to figure out everything about this person and compile a whole bunch of notes and then figure out what the story is?
It depends, because there's always a publisher involved, or an agent who is going to sell it to a publisher. But that's a bit more risky, because you don't necessarily know if you're going to get paid. You have to actually make sure, if you're doing a ghostwriting job, that you're going to get paid, because you can waste a lot of time on something that goes nowhere. But yes, usually the publisher will already have an idea of the kind of book they want, so the aspects of the person's life they want to draw on. and they'll give you a bit of an idea of what they want, and then you do a lot of research of your own to find out what the stories are, and also what the person would like to write, because it is their book. So often they're very creative people. I've worked with people who weren't necessarily writers, but they were very creative. They had a good sense of storytelling and the aspects of their life that would be interesting to readers. So it's a really interesting collaboration. In a way, you're sort of like a midwife in a way, because you're drawing out of them what would be their best book or series of books. Quite often, if there's one, the publisher would actually like it to be several of them, because then they become more of them.
Right.
Yeah. Then they become it. Yes.
All right.
And although it sounds quite, sorry, I was going to say, although it sounds quite hard-headed, it is very rewarding, and you can get really good books out of this. Because what you get is a rather good alchemy of someone who can write and someone who's got some really good material to draw on. And if you get that balance right, it's a really rewarding thing to do.
Well, I can see that kind of thing, because you don't ever get to talk about that book because it's somebody else's book, right?
Yeah.
Because it's been ghost written. But if it's that kind of story, I can see, or that kind of book, I can see being okay with that. Like, this is the product that we're doing, and then there's the pay, and then they're happy with it, and everybody's happy. Whereas, like, you're like, all right, come up with this fantasy fiction that you just love. Now it's got to have somebody else's name on it at the end of the day, and like that, I can see that would be heartbreaking.
Yeah, that would be. Yes. I certainly couldn't have given away any of my proper books, but it's a different kind. It's a different way of using what you know.
We talk quite a bit about story structure here on the channel. What is your relationship or perspective on story structure, for it, against it? And especially, I want to talk about your index card method and how that relates to story structure.
The index card method is one of the methods I've got in my Nail Your Novel book. It's a method for planning how you are going to have all the events in your book, where you're going to put them. And what you do is you take a set of index cards, a really big fat marker pen, and you make really short notes about each scene. So you'll take an index card and write, Carl goes to the house of the dead, and you put that down. And then you think, well, what happens before that? Well, I know he's got to meet the person who will introduce him to the house of the dead, so I'll put that on the card. And you gradually build up a series of things. They're going to be scenes in the book. And then you look at them and you think, what's the best order for all this? Because you really need to put everything in an order that will make the most compelling story. And this is where the structure is really important. There are various names for these. There's Christopher Vogler has his particular theory of story structure, how a story goes. Joseph Campbell has another, which is quite similar. Blake Snyder, the screenwriter, has another, but they are sort of similar. What usually happens is you have someone in an ordinary world, and they go somewhere, and things start to happen, and then they cross a point of no return, and they really can't go back. And then they go through all sorts of challenges and trials and trouble. There's always got to be trouble. And it comes to a crescendo at some point. And eventually there is a point where there is no more to say about it, and that's the end. And that is already a structure. So you start with someone in one place, and you take them through some ordeals, and they end up somewhere else. And then you have to figure out how you're going to keep people engaged with and interested in what's going on, because there's a key point of storytelling that I talk about in my plot book, which is you always want the reader to be curious. You want them to think, but I must just know what happens next. If they don't care what happens next, you failed. So you've always got to keep them wondering what happens next. To do that, you need to have a sense of change all the time. You have to have a sense that important things are happening, and that, I mentioned you can't sort of go back and undo things. There have to be little points of no return all the time, so that the hero can't just decide, you know what, I'm fed up of all this trouble. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Just not do it.
Yeah,
or you do it later or whatever.
Yeah, or just, really, there's no urgency. No, I don't have to carry on. No, I haven't ruined anything. I'll just undo everything. No, in a good story, there is no undo. So you have to have a feeling that things are happening all the time. And so that's the pace of a story, actually, how things are changing all the time. If you look at any story that's keeping your attention, it's because something is changing all the time. Then, once you've got that sense of change, and no going back, there's another structural aspect which is really important, which is bigger twists. And these are often called plot points. And people talk about inciting incidents and first major turning point, second major turning point, climaxes and all that kind of thing. But you need a certain number of bigger changes as you go along, because readers get very used to you going, little change, little change, little change, little change. And they start to think, nothing's really happening now, is it? I've got used to that sense of change. So you have to have a bigger change and go along a bit more in the new status quo. And then another bigger change and then go along in the status quo. And this is where the cards system comes in, because what you can do is you can lay out your story events and you can think, which of these is a really big change? And then you know where in the story to put it, because you know when the reader will be ready for a bigger change. And you can think, well, if I make that the bigger change, entry to the House of the Dead, then at the end, meeting the person who made sense of it all, or something. If you think, well, those are my major events, then I should put them in the points where the reader needs a bigger change. And that tends to be a quarter of the way through, which is usually the first big turning point. And halfway through, there's usually a real big switch halfway through a story that pitches it into kind of a new, more serious tone. Things become a lot more serious. And then at the 3/4 point is where you've got all the trouble really being flung around everywhere, and everyone is in the biggest trouble possible, and they've got to sort it out. So that's basic story structure. That's how you write a story that keeps people really curious all the time. You have little changes, and just when they've got used to the little changes and they think they know what's going to happen, you bring in something much bigger that makes them think, oh, now I didn't see that coming. Now I've really got to read on. And then you let them go on a little bit more. And in the middle, another big change. And it suddenly got more serious. And then they go on and on and on this more serious vein. And really the reader should be very gripped by then. And then the climax where just everything just comes home to roost. Does that make sense?
Yes. When I remember when I was going through your book originally and index cards, like, okay, so I went and got some index cards and was working with markers and putting stuff down. One of the things that, okay, what's going to be in this book? Okay, here's some scenes. Okay, put them on the index card. You recommended shuffling that stack of cards.
Yeah.
Right. So, which on the surface sounds, okay, ridiculous. Like, what if this happens before, like this happens before this? But then what if this does happen before this? And shuffle these things up. Why is the taking all these ideas and shuffling them and seeing what comes out at random so important? What does that do for you?
It allows you to just get out of list thinking, because often we think, oh, well, so this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. And this is one reason why I write the ideas on index cards rather than make a list. Because if you make a list, you automatically think it has to be in that order, but it doesn't. And often you find you have had your best idea at the start. And you often see this when people write backstory into a manuscript. They'll think of loads of really interesting stuff in a character's background and they'll write it down and it's really rich. Then they think, I don't know what's going to happen in the actual story. But they have already thought of something really good. So if you can find a way of just writing down what you've got and thinking, I could use this in a different order, and that might be a lot more dynamic and interesting and powerful, and get the effect I want. So it's always worth messing around with the order of things and seeing if by doing that, you actually get something much fresher than you were originally imagining, or much closer to kind of what you were hoping you would do. So it's always worth playing around with the order. Don't just accept things in the original order you thought of them in, because you might not be making the best of them. And quite often I found when I've critiqued manuscripts for people that they've got their best ideas in the beginning. And if they just reworked them and made the whole story come to that at the end, it would be a terrific book.
Or I think originally when I was writing things down, it's like, okay, the book's going to start at this date. The story starts at this date. The story's going to end at this date. So therefore, what's the list of steps that you have to go through in order to get from here to there? But that it can be very static, and just very linear. Like I described, instead of ups and downs and twists and turns and things like that are constantly driving on. And so if you take that linear step and shuffle them, like maybe you realize that maybe if things happened in different orders, at least what I realized, you start to generate the twists and things like that. Because at first you think, now how could that possibly happen before that? This other thing that you would think comes after. But it's like, oh no, well, I've got this other idea now, and that sparked an idea. So I thought that was very interesting.
And it gives you ideas, as you just said, because you think, well, how could that happen? No, wait, it could be like that. And if you've taken yourself by surprise, you'll probably take the reader by surprise too.
You coined this term, squeeze the lemon, which we've used on this channel. I've brought up on this channel before when we've been studying stories or books or movies and things like that. I was like, okay, we had a lemon here that didn't get squeezed. So will you articulate for us then what the squeeze the lemon idea is and why it's so important?
The squeeze the lemon idea is often, I see this a lot in manuscripts that I critique. Often people put an idea in, but they haven't got the most drama out of it, or the most story juice, really. So one of the things I frequently do is just go through someone's manuscripts and say, you could squeeze this harder. You could squeeze this harder. This should be much more difficult for the character. Don't make it easy. Find a way to make it harder. Or they might have got the characters getting what they want too easily, or they might have got a situation where it's obvious to me there would be far more difficulties, which would be interesting, dramatic difficulties, and really interesting for the reader. And so squeeze the lemon. If you put a lemon in there, make sure you just get the most out of the idea. And again, it's hard to see for ourselves at first, because you might just think, I'll have these people living in a dystopia where particular kinds of things are forbidden. And I'll say, okay, go deeper. Look for more things you could do with that. You haven't used this to its fullest potential yet. So look for the full potential of anything you put in. And again, this is why exercises such as writing things on cards allow you to step away from what you're already wedded to, what you think the story should be, and just look at it afresh and think, is there anything here I could make more of?
I wonder, like for me, when I was thinking about that, and you've got all these different events, okay, and it's already going to be this fantasy story or this epic historical fiction or something like that, and you think, well, this happens, and here is something that's realistic, okay, and so you write it like that, or conceive of it like that, but then you look, okay, that's one of those lemons, though, that even though, okay, this might be a realistic thing to happen, this is a story, these are characters, so I forget who it was that was like, these characters are supposed to love harder, hate more. I mean, these aren't real people. They're characters. They're supposed to be amped up. They're supposed to have more sex than the normal people. These are characters in the story. So, okay, we hit a point that, well, maybe that was a realistic thing to happen, but it wasn't the most dramatic thing to happen. Squeeze the lemon.
Mm. Yeah. Something else about drama is that drama doesn't work quite the way most people think it does.
Okay.
The most dramatic things that you can have a character do is make difficult choices. Particularly in prose. In movies, it's a bit different. In movies, physical action looks dramatic, but in books, in novels, it's actually much more interesting to present someone with a choice. Here's an example. I was reading a biography of a rock band, and one of the rock musicians had been taking various drugs, had a seizure before going on stage. His girlfriend was thinking, oh my God, do I let him go on stage? Do I call the doctor? Because the doctor will probably stop him going on stage, and this really matters to him. And the rest of the band are saying, don't call the doctor. He's got to go on. Is it worse to be him with the seizure, or is it worse to be her with the choice? If you are reading about it, the worst thing is to have the choice. So if you give someone a difficult choice in a story, that is absolutely gripping, because there's so much at stake. They've got to figure out what's the right thing to do. So there's a point about drama and squeezing the lemon. If it's in a situation like that, just look for the person who's going to have the hardest time, and especially if it's an emotional thing rather than just a physical thing. Because also in any story, absolutely, any reader knows that the writer can decide whether the guy recovers and goes and gives the concert with no problem at all. They know that you've decided that already, and you can do whatever you like because you're the writer. But somehow, if you are writing about this from the point of view of the person who has to make the choice of call the doctor or let him go on stage, they don't know what is going to happen. They somehow believe that a lot more.
So okay, let's use that example of the going on stage. So it seems like, let's write this out, and you could have a story where, okay, the person cuts themselves, and are they going to go out on stage, for some kind of concert? But then you're like, hey, wait a minute, we got a lemon here, where we're going to have something medical happen to the person, and we're going to have as the other person making the choice. So let's not make it a cut. Let's make it a seizure. Let's make it a more major medical event. That would be squeezing the lemon. And also, let's not make this just any concert. Let's make this the most significant concert.
Yes.
They're going out to.
You're raising the stakes. That's the thing. Squeezing the lemon is connected to the idea of stakes in the story, which is something that a lot of storytellers talk about. How much does it matter whether this thing happens or doesn't?
Okay, let's talk about stakes for a moment too, because we've talked about that here as well. We've talked about stakes versus scale, because when we were talking about, okay, what does it matter whether or not this happens or not? It seems like we've often come up with examples, especially if we're talking about fantasy or science fiction stories, where the scale will get very big, and often to the point where it's often or can be described in like numbers. How many millions of people are going to die? Or, it seems like in Marvel stories, they've got to up this, the Marvel movies, they've got to up the scale. So the world is always about to blow up. Well, but we've tried to blow up the world before. So now the whole universe has got to end, by the end of this movie. So it just, and eventually you can't go any further if that's what you're trying to do. I mean, how many movies in a row can you tell where the entire, or that, okay, we got to move to the multiverse. The whole multiverse is going to blow up. But if we're talking about scope or the scale of this can be internal to a character, and how significant, how much does it matter that X is going to happen to them? What's the difference between scale and scope in your story, and how do you use that?
I think you've described that rather well, actually, because the scale, although it might sound very important if the world ends, it won't matter. If the world ends in a moment, everybody, you probably won't know about it, you won't care. And it becomes something you can't relate to. But if, as you say, it matters to somebody in an internal way, my family might die, or the thing that really matters to me might disappear. That's relatable. And so even if the world might be about to blow up in a story, it's good to also find some way of making it just more personal in a way. And those are always more compelling than the universe or the multiverse going fat.
The reverse can be true too, because I was just reading a story where a guy's son was killed. And I think that's supposed to be significant, except for, man, nobody in the story seemed to care, not even the guy. And I was like, okay, so like there was a moment, I guess there was a lemon to squeeze that, okay, I think it was supposed to be significant that there was this attack and the guy's son died, but actually nobody cared because we were focused on this, this other bigger battle over here. But I was like, okay, that would have been a moment to add the drama, to see this person react and things like that. And it wasn't enough just to say that, oh, the guy's son is dead.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is something I see quite a lot. Something will happen and the writer will forget to put the reaction in. And so we're left thinking, wait a minute, there should be a bit. And if he doesn't care, we need to see that too. We need to really see.
It needs to be significant.
Yeah, we need to see what this means. What this means is really important. It's more important than what happens, actually.
That's come up with character death that's been talked about here on YouTube quite a bit. That was talking about, like, if you're going to have someone die that's significant in the story, it's often even not as much about that person's death, but seeing everybody else's reaction to the death. You're not coming, you see this person, this main character is going to die. And the example is Spock. Main example is Spock in The Wrath of Khan. That the death of Spock is highly significant, but what really hammers that home is Kirk's response to that and the whole rest of the crew's response to that death. And if that's not there, it's not significant.
Yeah, and that's a story that people want to see. It's a horribly surprising event. And you have to then see what happens, what it does to the whole world of the story, to those people, what they do afterwards, what it makes them want next. And yeah, it's very, very important. Never miss something like that. If you're writing a story, guys, never miss exploring the reactions to something. And again, it's easy to miss these kinds of things if you don't if you're not used to looking for them.
So the scale versus scope idea, when I was thinking about this, because to keep you from getting in the Marvel movie ratchet that, okay, we got a world and then universe blowing up and then multiverse blowing up, because you can only go so far. But I realized that you can tell stories with significance to certain characters. So great scope to that character over and over again. There's an infinite number of stories that you can do, because you're not trying to always slide up. You're always going to, okay, now here's this next character and what's really important to them and what do they really have to have happen and really want to have happen, and build the story around that, rather than having to go up with, oh my God, millions were at risk, millions of lives were at risk last book. Now it's billions, and then it's gonna be trillions and whatever. These numbers that we don't care about. So I was challenging myself. I'm writing a story now. I'm challenging myself on that side of things. I'm like, what is something that's very insignificant in the physical world, like to the world at large, but could be extremely significant to the character?
Yes.
How do I hammer that home? So how do you build that? If you let's say you're taking that as a challenge. I want to write something that's very insignificant in the grand scheme of things in the physical world, to most everybody, but I want the readers to be invested in this character and this thing that's really important to them.
Yeah, you have to show why it matters. And you always have to do this anyway but when you're setting up any character with a dilemma or a bit of trouble they're going to get into, one of the things you have to introduce very early on is the thing that's bothering them, the thing they fear. Maybe, you know, if they fear they're going to lose a person, or lose their job even though they hate it. So there's a nice bit of conflict, internal conflict. They both want it and they don't want it. You have to find ways to show the reader why such and such a thing matters. I've just glanced across my bookshelves and I'm looking at The Talented Mr. Ripley. That's got a rather interesting beginning. It's got Ripley in a bar worrying that he has been recognized, which he really doesn't want. So that's a brilliant way of introducing someone who it matters to him to stay incognito all the time. And there are people who could come out and make trouble for him because he's done some bad things. So by doing that, it introduces the sort of the game that Ripley is playing all of his life with the whole world. And it also is that it does another thing. If you do two things at once with a story, it feels really satisfying to the reader. It also shows you somebody who's very clever and capable, but in a moment of vulnerability. This is his Achilles heel, and you don't often get to see his Achilles heel. So that's a good way to introduce a character, introduce a thing that matters to them. It doesn't matter what the actual thing is, so long as the audience understand this matters and they become curious about what trouble this is going to create for them.
I was thinking about, when I was thinking about that, what's the least significant thing is like a child with their stuffed animal. You know, what is the stuffed animal? But could I make the loss of this stuffed animal and whether or not they're going to get it back, like so compelling to the child? Because that's what you care about when you're a child. You know, that's not, you know, ultimately the stuffed animal, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it could be the entire world to the child. And it could,
and actually you could generate, you could make it matter through family dynamics. So if they think, not only have they lost it, but if they think their older brother, who they really sort of chafe against, has stolen it, then that creates a more complex kind of loss, because not only have they lost the thing that matters to them, it was stolen by their brother and they're simply not having that. So you can make almost anything significant. It's a really interesting exercise you come up with there. Actually, it reminds me of one of the first books I tried to write. My husband writes, he writes actually loads of different kinds of books, but one kind of book that he's written is multiple choice game books, which are very interesting as exercises in storytelling and playing what if. And I decided to try and write one about teenage girls in a school. And I thought, right, what's the smallest thing possible that could set off a story? And I thought, a pen. Somebody loses a pen. You know, it's a really ordinary and really insignificant thing. But what situation would that loss of the pen be? In what situation would that be something that mattered? And I thought, okay, someone comes around to somebody's house to help with homework. There's some pens lying around and someone picks one up, does something with it, and then walks out with it. But it happens to be a rather nice gold pen that belonged to the character's father. Now, if that goes missing, there are going to be questions, or maybe there won't be, but the character is worried. And then she thinks, how am I going to confront the other girl and ask if she's got this pen? And there's something about their personalities that means that won't go well. So if you've got personalities involved that are going to make things more difficult, this pen becomes actually Pengate. You can escalate. You can start from something tiny, as you say, and just use people and their dynamics and the way they get on or don't get on, their rivalries, to make a mountain out of a molehill.
You know what I was thinking when you said the pen and the girls? I was thinking that this is a pen that was like unique to her with like certain kinds of colors, swirled ink and things like that she was using. So this was like her signature, like kind of pen that she would use to write like notes in class and stuff with. And then it's stolen, and then some other girl can forge a note to her crush because it's written in this particular kind of ink.
Yeah, but you can start with something tiny like that and just see where you can go with it.
I think that's
a lot about storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's an underused exercise. So it's interesting that you talk about that too, because I don't see that written written about at all, really, when on that idea of the scale versus scope. And I think that we should talk more about that. That like, okay, if you can make a story about the smallest thing and make it really significant, you can do that over and over and over again. So think about, for different characters and things like that, because you can make anything significant and build this around. Because then I was thinking, let's say you're going to have the whole world blowing up arc. Let's say you've got the world building that you've got, and it's amazing, and it's your fantasy or your epic and stuff like that. I thought that, okay, actually later my job, because after the world building and all the epic history, is to find out where the stories are in that. And you're going to take a character and you're supposed to, because at first, I think when I sat down originally with your book, okay, I was planning out, I got all the epic history of the fall of the kingdoms and all of this. And I was like, all right, but somewhere in here, there has to be a character that has something significant to them. And what's going on in this is the backdrop. Like they're going to be at this particular time period and be seeing these events, but that might not even be the significant thing to them. Like all of that's going on, they're participating in those events, but the loss of the stuffed animal, for instance, or the pen or something like that is going on. That's actually the story that's inside the epic history.
Yes, and I'm just thinking you could have a situation where, okay, the world might be about to end, but there's somebody who's got maybe some wrong that he wants to put right before it does, and that could be how he treated somebody and wished he didn't. And so maybe they're trying to get back and going through various ordeals, trying to get back home to maybe apologize to somebody. And it doesn't matter because the world's going to blow up, or if it does, maybe it doesn't blow up. But the thing that really matters to them is something that they did to another person, which is a way to really make something different and personal and gripping.
When you said that, it makes me wonder that different kinds of ways people could react to that. Like if you said your story, okay, the world's going to end in whatever amount of time, some short time frame, whatever, and you've got somebody who's like, okay, I got to go set something right, even though it's not going to matter at the end. I got to go set something right. Whereas somebody else's response is like, so it's all about to end, so I might as well go shoot that guy. That guy who did something to me, I'm going to shoot him because there's no consequence anymore. And the contrast between how different people might respond to that situation.
Yes, yes. I think that there's a film. It might be called Bucket List, or it might be called The End of the World, something like that. But the world is going to end, and everyone is just going mad. They're doing the things that they never got around to doing. They promised themselves they would. Like take heroin, and then there are some people who've actually got something serious that they want to just get out of their soul. And the contrast. This is something really important about stories. If you've got contrast like this, someone who is sort of hurting and has a wound that they need to heal in some way, versus a lot of other people who are quite a lot more blithe and unbothered. That's very compelling. Readers really sort of start to warm to the vulnerability of someone who is more vulnerable than everyone else around them.
It's an interesting. That exercise is really interesting too, because that's saying that what the world's going to end. Okay, then it's not going to matter, that the events are not going to matter ultimately in a grand scheme of things. Like we were just talking about, okay, does the stuffed animal really matter in the grand scheme of things? No, but it's going to matter to that person. If you're telling a story where the world's about to end, you also know that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. That's in this case what's driving the story. But how those people are spending their last few days, you as the author need to make it really matter to that person. That's the challenge. Because
And you need
that's
to
why
make
you're
it-
going to read. This really
and
matters
to the read-
to this person.
And you make it matter to the reader as well.
And
by getting them
therefore
involved.
to the reader.
Yes.
Even though on an intellectual level, you're going, yeah, I know that everybody's going to be dead in 3 days anyway, because that's the countdown clock or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So intellectually, it doesn't matter, but it really, really emotionally matters. And so it does matter.
And we really do like those stories, the things that emotionally matter. I think reading and stories in general, not just stories you read, but stories are a very emotional thing. We have a feeling of rightness, and something has a satisfying ending if it seems to somehow be put right, doesn't it? And that's an emotional feeling.
Rightness before the end. Oh, I like that theme. It matters that it was right, that it was made right before the end, and whether or not someone's struggling to do that.
Yeah, and whether it is, because that's how you know there's no more to say.
Well, then that's interesting from the two perspectives. The guy, the one who wants to make something, to make an apology or make amends, that in his mind or her mind or whichever one is setting something right before the end. Whereas the other guy might be motivated by that same philosophy, but he's going to go kill someone because he felt slighted. So in his mind, that is setting something right before the end.
And if you want to explore a theme, it's really good to have lots of different ways to show the theme. So here you'd have a contrast between the person who thinks, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that guy didn't get away with it. Someone else is going to say, I'm going to go and put right the thing that I feel has been gnawing my soul because I did it wrong and I did wrong to somebody. So those are two aspects of putting something right. And that's where you can have a main plot and a subplot and a theme that seems to arise out of the story world and the things that people are doing. And that creates a wonderful feeling of coherence because the story seems to be really about something.
I like that because, yes, on one level of analysis, we're talking about an A plot or a B plot and things like that, and how often those work together. They work together best if they are about the same thing. So we've talked about that. Maxwell Alexander Drake has been on. He talks about Finding Nemo on that as a masterclass.
Oh, I love that.
So yes, we've talked about that extensively, and he talks about the theme of fear that runs through that. So if you looked at superficially what we were just talking about, somebody like, well, the A plot's about apology, making, and then the B plot's about revenge, but underneath that, they're both about trying to make something right.
Yeah.
And that's why they could work together on that underlying level, and that's what it's actually thematically about.
And if you're putting two stories together and you're thinking, somehow I want these together, don't yet know why, keep looking for what might be common to them. And once you become aware of that, you don't have to sort of put in speeches where people will say, you're both doing the same thing. But if you are aware of that, then you can bring it out more subtly and make the reader feel it.
Well, right. And in fact, we talked about that with Maxwell Alexander Drake. He was saying that your theme, you can't ever actually say that directly. It's your theme. You can't just say that directly. You don't want to have that guy, like you were just saying, that, hey, you two are both actually about setting things right. You can't ever have that. But you've got to inform that more subtly. So why you lit up when we said Finding Nemo? Why is Finding Nemo such an amazing story in your opinion?
Well, I like all of Pixar's. It is a Pixar, isn't it?
I believe so.
Let's because I love their storytelling. I love how they create characters you care about. They are they're individuals. They've got there's usually someone who's got their own little thing they really need to do in their soul, and it might be little, and they also manage to grab a cast of other characters around them, and some of them are funny and some of them are grumpy, and it's all wonderful storytelling, and it's very slick. I think my favorite, I've got quite a lot of Pixar favorites, but Toy Story 3 is terrific. And you wouldn't think that the third in a series would be the best of them all, but this one, Toy Story 3, it has the sense of a big epic adventure. They go and do things that really matter. They go into quite a lot of the time. They go into our world, which is very difficult for them, and so they go to completely uncharted places and it's the equivalent of us going into outer space. And they go and have adventures that kind of show us what our world is like, and they're their own people, and they're smart, or if they're a bit dim, they think they're smart. It's the characters as much as anything. I think they spend a lot of time developing the characters, and then knowing how they will cause trouble when they're together, which is great. That's a really important thing when you're designing characters. You want them distinct from each other so the reader can tell them apart. And you also want them to do very interesting things when they get together, simply because of the people they are and the agendas they've got. So it's really the characters, I think. For me, with Pixar, they obviously spend a lot of time with the characters, and then they generate as much story as possible about what they will do in those situations.
I'm a big fan of the Toy Story franchise and series as well. And it seemed like every time I watched one, I would come back to it, because I always pay special attention when there's a movie or any kind of story, but movie like that I typically is outside of my genre, that I typically wouldn't watch, but that I really, really love. To sit down and you watch, it's like, I don't really watch Westerns, but Tombstone is just a fantastic movie. So I pay attention when, like, what is Tombstone doing right that just makes me just love this movie and this story, even though, okay, it's outside of it. Toy Story is also one of those, and Toy Story is also great because you're right. They keep hitting with fantastic stories over and over again. And so, yeah, this is a story about, the kid who loses the toy and things like that. I wouldn't typically, but man, this is a fantastic movie. And so we all pay attention when the story's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it starts, I think, with the characters, because they've made them, and again, with Finding Nemo as well, they are funny. I'm thinking of the goldfish, who's voiced by... Dory.
Dory. Okay.
Yes. And there's a scene where this is probably going to be very boring for people who don't remember the film, and I'm really bad at remembering things too. But there's a desperate moment where they're all trying to lift a net that's got some character into rescue, and everyone's going, swim, 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 and Dory is going, swim, 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 because Dory only has a 5-second memory and she can't remember how bad it is. But the character there at that moment, you adore them all, because they're so sort of human and relatable, as well as being fish.
I've got one other topic to talk about here. I was about writing characters who are the opposite sex of yourself. So you have some information on this, and it seems like you talked about the difference of opinion between men writing women and women writing men in the general public about whether or not that's actually more difficult or not. What do you think about that?
It's a very political question at the moment. Actually, there are certainly a lot of people who think that you shouldn't write a gender you're not, or a race you're not. But we have been doing this for a long, long time, very convincingly. And on the subject of gender, there are very few novels that have a cast of just one gender. And you do have to try and put yourself in the shoes of other genders, and also hopefully of quite a lot of personalities that are not like you. It's really a question of, how do you write authentically about someone who you're not, and you are only actually one person. Right. So what we have to do is notice the differences between us and other people, and be curious about them, and be curious about wanting to understand their truth. It depends also what kind of book you're writing. If you're writing something that is about an aspect of society that is very misunderstood, and that probably is better written by an insider who, like you were saying about the ghostwriting and the books that are ghostwritten, the public like them because they come from a place of understanding. So you might get someone who puts their name on a book that they didn't write, but it does actually come from their lived life, their authentic experience. And there are certain kinds of books where that's really important. And then there are certain kinds of books where it's not so important, and also where the readers will believe more in the author. You say, does it come down, do you think, to how much the reader believes in the author? I think it might be that. Because I think in adventure kind of stories and certain kinds of genre fiction, and also in literary fiction, we're very willing to put our complete faith in the author, no matter what they're writing about. And then in other kinds of fiction, particularly ones that are about the experiences that at the moment haven't been written about so much, such as transgender experiences, for instance, that's still a very new area. And we think at the moment that the only people who are qualified to write about it are the ones who have personal experience of it. As that goes on, and there will be more first-hand accounts for people to draw on. There'll be more authors who will be trusted to write about this, even if that isn't their life. So I think it's a question of trust in the author.
But you would come up with what you talked about in the book, like when you were writing a scene about teenage boys. And the horse, but your husband was reading. It was like, okay, we have a misunderstanding of the dynamic that exists between teenage boys. I thought that was an interesting.
Yes, because the teenage boys didn't act like he remembered teenage boys acting, but they were more like teenage girls. So the situation was there was some kids riding a horse, and there was a mishap. I can't remember the exact details, but it's the reaction of the friends.
Someone
that
fell
was
off
important.
a horse.
Someone fell off, and the friends all said, "Oh, you were right. Oh, do you want to talk about it?" And my husband said, "That is not what guys would do. They'd all laugh. They'd just laugh, and they wouldn't want to talk about it." So he felt that it was written as though they were girls, even though they were supposed to be boys. So you do get differences like that. But but then, of course, how much of that is down to personality and the dynamics of a relationship? Equally, I do actually ride horses, and I know plenty of situations where I've been out riding with women, and something has happened, and we've all just gone, ha, 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 let's get back on. You're right. Can you walk? Yes, get back on. And so it's something you can generalize about up to a point, but you also have to consider what the reality of those characters' situations is like, and that's just as important as the gender, I think.
But I also thought that that there was some statistical analysis, and of course this was done. You talked about the gender genie, and of course this is a long time ago, and I was thinking about this with AI and things like that now. So there's the situation, but then there's like, I thought that was interesting because it's like, is there just a statistical mathematical way to look at these things and find out whether it was a man or a woman who wrote them? And you were saying yes, that there actually was.
Yeah, because with that tool, that was actually accurate. But before I discovered about that tool, I would have thought, well, it's a bit more loose than that. I think these days what matters is to be authentic and to be aware, first of all, of what questions you should be asking. So find out what a bunch of teenage boys would say about a situation. versus a bunch of teenage girls, and just see what rings true.
The gender genie was based on, it was talking about the modifiers of words, which I thought was interesting. You said the guys were more likely to say the house, whereas a woman was more likely to say my house or their house or something that was the modifier. So I wonder if you could use that to, like, because you're right, because when you're talking about like the overall plot or something, because I thought it was interesting, they disregarded the content. So whether they're talking about it, spaceships or horses or whatever it is, but the way that people talk about it might improve your style.
It might, yes. It's actually a long time since I wrote that book, and
I know. I'm going back to early material. I know.
And but actually, these are all details that are worth looking at. And remember also that characters are individuals. So one might say my house because their parents all said it. And so there's the subtleties on top of subtleties.
I wonder, we've got Doug, who is a frequent guest on the show. His novel about the Empress Theodora is obviously about a woman. And I've got, my uncle also tends to write stories with female leads. And, I think I was wondering, like, because you can't generalize, but it seems like those authors, those guys who do that, they say a phrase, well, I just found that she was the more interesting character. Like, I don't think they set out to write a female-focused story. It was that it seemed like to me, they often have a sequence of events in the story, or a sequence of events. Okay, here's the sequence of events. And then when they're looking at that, what's the story inside, they come to the conclusion that, well, gee, the female is the more interesting, the female character in it is the most interesting character. And I wonder if that goes to what you were talking about. If you've got a sequence of events, who's making the more interesting choices?
Yeah, the interesting choices. It is. Yes.
I want to go back and look at that, because if you're talking about, I mean, you could have, let's say you've got a king and a queen or something, and the king is the more powerful warrior, all of that, doing all of that, the physically, superficially cool stuff. But I wonder if you've got a situation where you look at that and go, but actually the queen is actually the one who's having to make the most significant choices. She's got the lemons to squeeze. I wonder if in that kind of situation go, no, wait a minute, she's got to be the main character. She's the one who the story is actually about. I'm going to look for that. Yeah. Well, do you want, in our closing minutes here, let's talk about something current then. Do you want to talk about Everest and tell everybody about it, or either one or both, and tell them why they need to pick it up and what it is all about and what inspired it?
Well, Everest was something. First. Yes. Okay. Yes, it started because I heard a story about a guy who fell into a glacier, and his body couldn't be retrieved. His relatives just had to wait until it glided down through the years, however long that took. They didn't know how long it would take. And I thought, what's that like? Because you've lost someone, but you haven't sort of got them, you haven't got the closure of having them returned to you. And also you imagine them kept there just young. And while you're getting much older, so they're going to come out and eventually they'll look as young as the day they went in, but you'll be decades older. And I thought, I've really got to do something with this. And then suddenly the name Everest popped into my head, and I thought, ever rest. Oh my goodness. So I decided I would write about somebody who fell into a glacier on Everest. And I started researching mountaineering and just the whole Everest landscape, and I was just spellbound by it, because it's so hostile. And it's amazing because you can get there on your own 2 feet. You can walk to a place that is almost more hostile to life than outer space. You can't breathe. The temperature will kill you. The ground might just fall away from under your feet, or an avalanche might fall on you. an incredible challenge to all the things we take for granted here, in our nice warm world. And then I thought, well, I have a character who falls into this glacier, and who's waiting for him? And then I thought, I'll make him a rock star. So he's at the pinnacle of his fame, falls off the mountain while
Squeeze the lemon. Let's make him
squeeze the lemon, exactly. Because I also felt there's a bigger theme here about memory and the way certain things freeze moments for us, and music does that. So he's being waited for by his girlfriend at the time, who has now gone on to other things, except she can't. 20 years on, she's still regarded as his tragic fiance. And then there's his best friend, who was his bandmate, and he's regarded as forever bereft and still tethered to this guy. And the rest of the world can look at him whenever they want, because they can play his records and his voice is still young. He's still beautiful on videos. He walks through warehouses in a big coat singing his song, and there are close-ups of him just mesmerizing the camera. And the whole world knows him as this young, beautiful man who sang their souls when they were teenagers. And they're waiting for him to come out of the ice. And so are his girlfriend, who would rather just have a life, but is still tethered to him. And his best friend, who was his music partner, who is also just tethered to him. And there are other people too, other musicians whose lives have been just skewed by this. And until he comes back, they will not ever rest.
Wow. Huh. So that is Everrest.
That's Everrest.
And that's on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. It's an audiobook as well.
It's also an audiobook. Okay, people love the audiobooks too. Oh, look, Audible sample right here, so we can also get it as an audiobook. All right. And what about not quite lost.
Not quite lost.
Not quite lost.
Yes. that was quite a different kind of book. It's lighthearted. It's quite like Bill Bryson, actually. It's just, I have a very serious side, which is Everest, and then I have a much funnier side, silly side. And Everest is massive in scale. You've got Mount Everest, you've got life and death, and Not Quite Lost is travel diaries from going not very far.
Well, already that's a travel diaries from not going very far. That's already captivating. That's quite a hook. That's a hook right there. Because everybody's got travel diaries from going to the other, side of the universe.
Most people climb mountains and things. No, we just got in the car and went a little distance. It's a book of unadventures, but it's about meeting people, and they're strange and they're wonderful. One of the places that we go to there's a chapter about going to places out of season. So we'd always be going to seaside towns in November and December where it's raining all the time and everything's shut and there's nothing to do except walk along shivering. And then you go into a shop and they're all desperate to see somebody because they haven't got any customers. And I went into one shop and it was a party clothes shop, and they were just trying on the costumes because they had nothing else to do. We went into a museum, and it was actually an aircraft museum. So it had lots of biplanes and right up to really modern helicopters. And the only other people there were the volunteers who were lovingly polishing these machines and grooming these beautiful machines because there was nothing else to do, but it was just what they all liked doing. And I loved that. I loved that sense of catching people unawares in their real moments. And then there are stories, there are some sort of bigger stories. There's an ESP experiment that I got involved in. And, I broke it.
What did that happen? What happened?
Well, you have to read the book, but I spoiled their ESP experiment.
I hope it was because of your great ESP abilities.
It was. I mustn't reveal the punchline actually, but it was because I'm a bit skeptical, and I think they thought I was a bit badly behaved. there's also a story about some people who were cryonicists. They were preparing to freeze each other when they die. And I stumbled across them, and I thought, I've just got to find out more about this. So I went and spent some time with them and asked them what they did. And so that story's in there. And there's the time when I got, I by accident got hired as a dancer for a commercial, a flash mob commercial, and I'm not a professional dancer, and I kept thinking I was going to be fired, but it was a great adventure, and just other things like going through the English countryside and getting lost and meeting people who thought we were complete idiots. So it's a warm-hearted book about just going out and having an adventurous mindset and finding adventures just because of the things you decide to follow.
Well, I love that. That makes me want to go out and have more, because I've spent a long time sitting here in this office, sitting here at this computer. What kind of adventures can be had by not going very far?
Yeah.
All right, Roz, thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you very much for spending your time with us.
And thank you. It's been such a good conversation. And you've given me some ideas. It was all I could do not to be making notes.
Oh, well, you should have. You should have. Well, okay. So we're going to put the links down below to the books, the website, all of that down below. So anybody who's looking for those will be able to find them. But rozmorris.org is your home base. Yeah, and is there
Yes.
Are you still on Twitter or X?
I'm on Twitter. Yes,
okay.
I'm at Roz_Morris. Make sure you spell the Roz with a Z and put the underline in, because there is another Roz Morris somewhere. So I won't see you if you tweet her.
Okay, ROZ, Roz with a Z on Twitter. Anywhere else that people need to find you?
I'm also on Facebook, and you can find me there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, everybody. And thank you, everybody who has joined us this evening. I will see you all soon.
Thank you.